Okay, welcome once again. I'm very pleased to have such an amazing panel here today. I think that is going to be a very interesting event. It's very popular, at least. We have a lot of people enrolled to see this side event. I will just wanted to start with some ground rules. First of all, I would just like to ask to all participants and speakers to mute yourself and only unmute when you need to speak, so we don't have those background noises. Also, we will have 3 presentations. Each speaker will have 30 minutes to give their speech and their presentation. I will be timing this. I will let you know 5 minutes before your time ends. The last presentation, Trisha and Cam, as I told you, you will have collectively 30 minutes too. So this will give some time for us to have some questions in the end of all the presentations. This is a 2-hour session, so we'll have at least 30 minutes in the end. For the participants, please feel free to write all your questions in the right box in the comment section in the chat. I will be monitoring it regularly, and we will go over all the questions in the end after all the presentations, okay? So feel free to also use the reactions we have that the Zoom allows now, just to try to inject some fun in this side event. One more participant. Okay, perfect. We are still getting more. Okay, so I will now go over, give a presentation for all the panelists, all the amazing panelists that we have here today. I will be following their presentation order, so we're also going to understand who is going to speak first. So first of all, we have Meyer Reikik. He will be talk about effective collaboration with private sector, how do nonprofits profit, highlighting the importance of communication in victim support sector and the commonalities and differences between private sector and nonprofit sector. Maher is the founder of Elastic Creative Agency and general manager at PM Network. He has a background in business and financial economics, and has founded 2 successful companies, one in education, PM Network, and one in advertising, Elastic. For the last 5 years, he has dedicated his work to positively impact individual organizations and brands around him, and has had the pleasure to witness how powerful impacting others can be. Our second panelist, welcome, Maher. Our second panelist is Nunca Tarino from Apav, the Portuguese Victim Support Association. Nuno will talk about communication awareness raising, and will focus on private project campaign and how the project will contribute towards providing information to victims of crime, and how to better understand how this information is provided in an effective and inclusive manner. Nuno has a background in advertising and marketing with specializations in communication, culture, and information technologies. He works in the communication department of Apav since 2007 and focuses on the development of the awareness raising campaigns. Nuno is also a jazz critic and writes for a Portuguese newspaper, Público, and a blog developed and created by him. He is also a published author, having published a book about the new generation of Portuguese jazz, Improvisando, and an essay on urban cycling in a literary magazine, Mammoth. And lastly, and definitely not the least, thank you for your presence. Our last speakers, Cam Potter and Trisha Henry from Victim Support New Zealand, that will talk about Victim Support New Zealand website and its online resource center. Cam has been Victim Support New Zealand General Manager for Funding Development and Communication since 2016. He has overseen the modernization of Victim Support New Zealand communication and fundraising systems, including national appeal for victims of the Christchurch terror attacks in 2019, and most recently leading the development of the new website. He has a career background in communication, marketing, and fundraising, across government and the community and voluntary sectors. Trisha Henry is a published writer, educator, and presenter, specializing in issues of trauma, grief, resilience, and mental health. She has lived experience of trauma herself and understands well the complexity and challenges that unwanted life changes bring, including crime. Formerly Deputy Chief Executive of the support agency Skylight, Trisha works currently on projects for a range of non-for-profit organizations and government agencies, and has successfully led the content development for Victim Support New Zealand's new website. Thank you so much, everyone, for your presence here. It's really, truly an honor to have such an amazing panel here today, and I hope I will be able to meet all the standards, and this is going to be a very good panel. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Maher. I know you have some presentations.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today. As Ines explained already, I will be talking about communication, its importance in the victim support sector. Yet me coming from a for-profit world, from the business world, I'm an entrepreneur. I will also discuss how effective collaborations can take place with private sectors. Let me check. Yes, communication is key to success for any organization. I don't need to go over again the whole importance of communication. We are all aware that communication is very important. And instead of starting immediately by talking about the non-profit sector, I wanted to provide you guys with a very basic model I just created so that we can understand a bit more the basics there. So this is the usual way for for-profit organizations, for-profit entities to operate. They solve a problem on the market. There's this pain on the market, if you want to use the business terms, and they solve it in exchange for money. So that's the easiest way. And the more problems they solve, the more money they make. Because people are willing to pay to get their problem solved. That's exactly how it works. So they trade value for money. And on the very basic way of business to operate, we understand quite easily the importance of communication and its impact. The higher the perceived value of your product or service, the more money you can make. And that's the end goal of a for-profit organization. The larger your audience to which you communicate about your offering, the more money you can make. And that's again the end goal of a for-profit organization. However, when we talk about non-profit organization, the business model is a bit different because most of the time money doesn't come directly from the people that are helped. It could be the case, obviously, but it's not always the case. We also have government money and also money coming from the public, from individuals, also organizations, etc. And there, the link with communication and its effect is not as obvious as it was in the for-profit example before. So my question is, why is it that communication is so important for non-profit organizations? Well, it depends. It can be very powerful, the communication, and very benefiting. But it really depends on the type of target. So in communication, for non-profit organizations, we can identify three main types of communication. We have three different types of targets. And for each different type of target, the benefits of communication will be different because also the purpose is different. Today, the other panelists will also talk about communication for victims directly, communication that is directly sent to the victims. There's also a lot of communication that is for victim workers, so professionals that support workers, and we are all some of these today. And then there is also the communication for the overall public and the population. Of course, the more you can communicate about your services and what you offer and what you really do to help individuals, the higher the perceived value is and the more you can impact others. And this is the main difference between a for-profit and a non-profit organization is the end goal. For a for-profit organization, we saw that the end goal is to create money, of course, to be profitable. For a non-profit organization, the main goal is to provide value to the people. And that's the whole difference. It is a big difference, and at the same time, both non-profit and for-profit entities, they share a common ground of value, because we have understood that most for-profit entities, at the end, in order to be profitable in the long run, they need to focus on value, because on the short term, yes, you can provide services or products with very high perceived value, but very low actual value. And then the customers will be disappointed once, maybe twice, but they won't be any third time. So for-profit entities have very easily understood, in order to be profitable in the long run, in order to be sustainable and to be a profitable company, they need to focus on value. And this is where both non-profit and for-profit sectors cross, is on the emphasis and the focus on value. So this is the common ground that both sectors share in order to do collaboration. Now, the question is, how can we have effective collaboration with private sector? Myself, as a founder of a for-profit company, I work with clients that are businesses, but I also work with non-profit organization. The work and the collaboration is very different, but as I said, because the main goal is delivering value, there is a common ground on which we can build a strong relationship. I will go talk about this in a second. But what I've seen so far is the mutual benefiting relationship we can have working with nonprofit. As a for-profit organization and coming from the business sector, we have identified, established, and we use on a daily basis strategic tools in order to be efficient, in order to optimize the result, to maximize the profit, to minimize the costs. We have strategic analysis, all these business practices that we use in order to beat competition, in order to be the number one, and to be delivering as much value as possible to the customers. All these techniques, all this expertise can be of use for the nonprofit sector in order to reduce the cost, to maximize the impact, and to maximize the effectiveness of every action that is taken in the nonprofit sector. So this is how we collaborate, and this is how we benefit with the nonprofit. Also, nonprofits collaborate with us, obviously, and also benefit to us in lots of different ways. So far, working with both types of industries, we have seen that the transparency is completely different. We have much higher transparency in the nonprofit sector. The way we work with our clients in the nonprofit sector is very much different in terms also of trust. So we really work together, and I've never had any negotiation with nonprofit sectors. What we really do is we sit together, we look at the limitations we have, we look at the ambitions we have, and we see how we can implement processes in order to deliver as much value as possible. So aligning interests is, of course, a big key to success in our organization. But I won't tell you more about how effective collaboration can be. Instead, I will give you some examples so that you can also have your own idea about this. Okay. So this is one of our latest projects. This was a fundraising project for, so the campaign was Universe for Agora. It's a Belgian organization. So the initial situation, the founders of Agora came to us with this initiative to raise money, as much fund as possible, in order to help students that were suffering from the COVID crisis effect. So not from medical sufferings, but the social and economic impact it had on our economy. This was 6 months ago, so quite some time after the pandemic had started. So that was already one problem. The timing was not optimal because most people, all the people have been already told about how problematic this was and how important it was to help people. So this was a message that was already being shared, and it was not something new. Second main problem with this campaign is that they wanted to help students by providing them food and by contributing to their way of living, lifestyle, as well as providing them with psychological support, as well as academic support. So lots of different ways for Agora to contribute to students, But not only, they wanted to provide the food coming from local restaurants that weren't able to operate anymore, by supporting them also financially and paying for the meal they would be delivering to the students, as well as helping local businesses that work in the fair trade sector by providing compensation for all the donators. So we had lots of different elements that we wanted to include in the fundraising campaign, because of course it was providing value and being very well impactful in all different ways. We needed to have something clear, to the point, and the intentions was really to bring the awareness that, okay, the pandemic is here for a while now, but the students are still in need and the local restaurants are still in need. We also wanted to raise funds, of course, and we also wanted to create a social momentum around the project so that people would be able to contribute and raise funds. So the solution was to come with an inclusive message through an eye-catching medium. In this case, we used a video. And the goal was, again, as I said, to trigger people so that they would be willing to know more about the project and eventually donate as much money as possible. This campaign was launched now 2 months ago. And yeah, we have seen a big difference from before having all the communication campaign we have created for them and afterwards, because the participation rate of donators had been multiplied by 10 after the campaign. So this is one example of how communication can be benefiting. In this case, really what was important is to communicate to the people, not to the students directly, but to the whole public about the needs and what actions they can take in order to overcome the need they had. That is the first example. Second example, this is an example I know quite well because PM Network is in fact my own company. I founded this company 3.5 years ago now. By the way, this company turned this month a non-profit organization, so that's also why it fits in this context. For the first 3 years, we were a for-profit company, and I have taken time to reconsider the reason and the purpose of my business, and naturally it came back to a non-profit entity. Anyways, so on the left side of the screen, you can see the previous identity of PM Network, and on the right side, you can see the difference. Now, besides the nice graphics and the nice visuals and the professional feel of the right side of the screen, I want to share with you the path that we have been through and the reasons and the reasonings that led us to this new identity. So PM Network is a tutoring company. We help students achieve better results at university by providing them tutoring services, right? After a year of operation, we understood that most students were not able, or at least it was very hard for them to accept the fact that they needed help, that they needed to be helped by others. That was one. And second, for the very few that accepted the fact that they needed help, they would be ashamed of taking sessions with PM Network and to be part of PM Network. How did I know this? Simply whenever we would receive feedbacks from the students, we would ask, okay, thank you very much. Can we share this on our social media? And the answer was always, of course, but please, I don't want my name to appear. I want to be anonymized. And this was something for us because you can't run an organization if people feel ashamed about being a customer or being part of your organization. So we had to rethink of the whole positioning of PM Network. And instead of being the network that helped struggling students, we became the network that helps all students to achieve better results. And this difference made a huge impact. First, because now all students are proud and we have even ambassadors among the faculties, but also because we have also developed a second type of target. So initially we only had struggling students coming to us. Now we have all ambitious students. So we have students coming to us with a 9 out of 20, willing to get an 11, but we also have students that already have brilliant grades, 15, 16 out of 20, but they need 19 because they want to integrate a specific master or a specific internship. And this is the effect of communication in this case for the branding and the positioning. So more than the visuals and the nice colors and the fancy designs, it was about the message that we wanted to share and how we want to be perceived by the public. And now, last example that you know quite well, it's our recent collaboration with Victim Support Europe. So with VSE, what we've done, they came to us a while ago with an amazing ambition. They were willing to create an online environment to develop a community where professionals could share, exchange, educate themselves, improve, and yeah, exchange about the best practices, and also create an environment that is safe for all professionals to share and to ask for help, to provide help, and really have this synergy coming from this environment. This environment was meant to be online, so there was some specific features they wanted. I won't describe the whole project because we would take forever, but instead I will name a little bit the limitations we had. So of course, the first one was budget limitation. That's the first one. Second one, we had technical development requirements. So we wanted to develop specific tools, like the video conferencing was one, online library was a second one, online content. We wanted for users to be able to communicate, exchange with each other, engage with each other, get to know each other also on the platform. But the main limitation, or at least the main concern we had back then, was to be able to create a tool that is going to be used. Because creating an online platform very fancy with lots of features, if it is not being used by the users, it is of zero value, right? Because in this very specific project, all the users would create the value. It's because of their contribution, interaction, communication within each other that we would create value and synergy. It will not be VSE creating all types of documentations and material. We expect it to come from the users. So beside all the technical challenges that we had a strategic challenge to be able to create and enhance a real community that would be lasting. And this is why we had to come up with specific preparation, specific processes and strategical analysis in order to first understand the users, understand their customer path, understand the journey they go through, and in order to also understand the incentives they would have in order to communicate and share. An important aspect also for VSE was to be able to create a tool that will be available for other member organizations to share their documentation, their contents, their best practice, their expertise, but also a tool for other organizations to be able to teach and to educate their staff, their volunteers, etc. So all in all, what we have developed with VSE, and the platform is being launched quite soon. I think we'll be updated about this in a few weeks. So we're very excited about that. All in all, what we created really is a whole business plan on how to have a platform that is effectively working, where people are in fact engaging instead of a fancy online tool that no one really cares about. So this is a third way of communication and the importance of business relationships, because we can really build something more than the technical part, but really build something that will bring organic interactions on the platform. Yeah, now coming back to my main question, how do nonprofits profit? Um, so what we've seen so far is that, of course, communication is important, and depending on the target you have, the benefits of communication will be different. But this is basics. I don't need to go over this again. Now, what we've seen also is that collaborating with for-profit entities can be very beneficial as long as we share one crucial aspect is the common ground, which is delivering as much value as possible. And what we've also experienced, at least from Elastic's side, is that in order for successful collaboration, we need in the partnership specific elements. The first one, I mentioned it again, is the long run orientation of the relationship. We can't have a one time off a project that will lead a real synergy and a real collaboration, because we also need trust, we need transparency, and we need fairness between the organization. An important aspect, and this is something we've seen with, for instance, VSE, but also Agora, also PM Network, is aligned interests. If the interests are not aligned between the agency, in our case Elastic, and the client, it cannot really lead to any successful partnership. So we don't have, as I mentioned already, we don't have proper negotiations between the client and the agency. Instead, it's really brainstorming and deciding together what are the limitations we have, what are the objectives, and what are the priorities we set to the project. Flexibility and proximity, this was one of the most important part of all our collaborations. And at the end, also, of course, meaningful projects and meaningful ambitions. A big advantage we have as a for-profit entity to be working with non-profit organizations is the meaning of every project that we start with non-profit companies. It's completely different to be working and helping victim in Europe, for instance, as opposed to selling cans of mushrooms, as we might have done already in the past. So finding a company that is really touched by your goal and that is sensitive to your ambition, this is very important. And I know that it is very complex for an NGO to find such agency where you can have relationship, long run relationship, trust, transparency, and align interests. The best advice I would give in order to find such agency and to be able to work with is, of course, trial and error. That's one way. There's no secret. Second way is, of course, to rely very much on the experiences of your member organizations and people you know from your sector, because this is the best way. Word of mouth is the best way for you to find the best agency to work with. Thank you very much. I hope you had as much fun as I had giving you a little talk about the communication and especially how nonprofit can collaborate with for-profit companies. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Mark. You kept the time. Thank you. Perfect. So I will give the floor to Nuno.
Hello, hi everybody.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, my name is Nuno. I work for the communication department of Apav, that's the Portuguese Association for Victim Support. And in the sequence of Maher's talk, I'll talk a little bit about an example of a campaign that we have developed in a partnership with other NGOs, but also with a media company that's a profit company. So I'll share my screen now. Let me see. So I hope you are seeing my PowerPoint. Yeah. So I'll give a I'll talk a little bit about communication and awareness raising and the example of the Previct campaign. Well, the Previct the campaign is a campaign awareness campaign that was developed in the sequence of a project, an European project that Apav is a partner, but there are also other partners. The promoter is VSE, the Victim Support Europe. There are partners from 6 different countries. There are Albania, Croatia, Hungary, Malta, Lithuania, and us from Portugal. And there's also the media company, that's the Transcendent Media Capital. That's a partner that we Apav had already worked with them in the past, and we are working now in this project. Well, the idea for this campaign was to get some best practices, to identify some ideas that would be common to all these different NGOs, and in the end to deliver a campaign. So that's what we did. We did some research on the best practices. We had some research campaigns that we Apav had in the past and had some success. The other partners did the same. There were meetings and discussions, and then we proceed to the next step, that was to identify what kind of information is most pressing to be made available to the victims. And this is more complicated because in each country, each NGO has its own difficulties. and its own questions, and it was hard to find this common ground, or it was not easy at the beginning to see how we could do that. And after that, and with the support of the media company, the Transcendent Media Capital, there was the development of the innovative and creative campaign with the information tools based on the research and the target group consultations. So in the end, we made this campaign, and the campaign is nowadays still occurring, and in the end we'll measure the impact. So how we did it? We tried to respond to some questions to get the actual information needs of victims in each country. And this is difficult because what I've said before, because different countries have different questions. To deliver information to victims, law enforcement, and victim support professionals through tailored, inclusive, and accessible tools to be with content developed in each country. Then to deliver information in by means of high quality information tools, carefully designed and delivered by media professionals. And this is where the media company enters. And to launch a carefully designed media campaign to reach a maximum number of victims in all the countries. And in the end, the measuring of the impact. So we in Apav, Apav is we are 30 years old. We have some experience in the field and also in the communication and raising awareness campaigns, and we have also some experience in European projects that result in awareness campaigns. These are some examples for examples of projects that we have done in the past, and some more successful than the others. But I think at least for victims is a good example of a campaign that we have done in the past. But there's also the Hate No More. It's a campaign about hate speech. Sorry. There's the Project Talk about communicating online. Also, the Proteus project is about cybercrime. So these were some previous projects and some ideas that we had when we did the research. So we had to get to the message. We had some challenges, and I guess the main one is to get a direct and universal message that could be translated to different countries and languages with people with different cultures, and sometimes the words have slightly different meanings. So this was a challenge to get to this message. And we tried to focus on the support to victims of crimes, to support victims of different crimes, and also to include information of to the victims' rights. And in the end, the idea was for the campaign to have a same design, visual content to be universal, but to get to different countries, to the victims of different countries. So with this in mind, we get to this with the work of the creative work of Transcendent Media Capital. We get these two key messages. One of them is the call to action, and the other one to reinforce the positiveness of the message. So we get to this main message, that's reclaim your safety, to get safe, and then there was this second slogan that was together we can. So we get to we put together these two sentences, and the campaign was made all about this. So the campaign started in the end of the year, but the main focus on the dissemination was mostly on the 22 of February, on the European Day of our Victims of Crime, and and this was the visual of the campaign. This is the example of the poster for Malta, for the Victim Support Malta, and it's in English, so it's easier for everybody to understand. So there are the two main sentences. Also, if you are a victim of crime, call for free and confidential support, and the contacts, the website, and the telephone number. So also in this campaign, we have the one video that's a main piece of the campaign, and in the video there is one character that's a victim of one type of crime, but there are also other people that appear, and each video was made locally. So in the end, for each country, there are different videos, and from those videos, the characters appear in the other materials, namely in the poster. So in the end, we have 6 different images for every country. With in each poster there are 6 different persons, and this was important to have people filmed locally, for people that sees the posters and the videos, to identify themselves with the materials. So in the end, we have these 6 posters, and this is the main image of the campaign. So and here in Portugal, we did the implementation of the campaign in 3 main channels: the online, offline in the printing materials, and offline in the outdoors. And we had we tried to put the campaign everywhere as much as we could, but even the budget was not so big, but we tried to put the campaign with some of these materials. So in the digital, we had social media posts that are based on the adaptations of the campaign, of the poster. And in the Instagram, we had this carousel where we developed the message for each one of the crimes. We use all of them, the 6 different characters, 6 different victims of crime. So everyone had its unique post. So and we had this video, but now I'll show you another video that's not the Portuguese, but the Maltese one, that's easier for you to understand. So let me see. I'll share the video.
Crime. It can happen anywhere.
My ex-boyfriend stalked me.
They broke into my home.
I was raped.
They used my credit card number online.
I was beat up in a bar.
My husband abused me. My name is Maria, and this is my story. I was so busy juggling the children, keeping the house organized, that I didn't have time for my friends. If I did go out with my friends, he would accuse me of abandoning my family. So when my friends would call, I stopped answering. After my mom called and told me she was worried for my safety and that she had been in contact with Victim Support Malta, I thought that she was going to make matters worse. I told her that she was being ridiculous. I stopped taking her calls too. When I offered to get a part-time job to help out with the household expenses, he got really angry. Said I only wanted to work so I could sleep with other men. After my husband went from verbal abuse to physical abuse. Everyday things began to feel unsafe. I felt so alone. I was ashamed of what was happening, and I couldn't talk about it to anyone. He had convinced me that it was all my fault, and I believed him. I had to get my life back on track. My mother's warning now made sense, and I decided it was finally time to get help. So I got in touch with Victim Support Malta. Their trained professionals talked to me about my rights, gave me access to counseling, and I learned that the abuse wasn't my fault. They helped me to set up a safety plan with my mom, so if things became too dangerous, I could leave. Reclaim your safety.
Together
we can.
Call today for free advice.
Okay, so this is the Maltese video, and you can see also there are videos for every country and every partner in the VSE website you are seeing now, I hope. In there's these ongoing projects and there's Predict there. And in the end, then there is the list of countries and the list of materials that are available for you to see if you are curious about it. But let me just return to the presentation. So the video was the main piece, but from the video there are used the elements, the people that are in the video are the ones that appear in the process. I can go back just for you to see, like the Maltese poster, the people that are in the video are the ones that are represented in the poster, and this happened for every country and every partner. So they were all filmed locally, and were all people that were used in the video are the ones that appear in the posters. So this for you to understand the connection between the materials. And besides the digital part, the social media and videos, there was also more traditional campaign. We had posters and a brochure. In the brochure, the contents were made locally with the information about each NGO and about the rights of victims of crime. There was the poster, the brochure, also an infographic with information about victims' rights, and also a sticker. And here in Portugal, we have a little budget. We didn't have much, but we have this discounts with some partners, and we were able to put the campaign in some bus stops and in the underground, in the metro, We were able to put the campaign in streets in Lisbon and Porto, the two main cities. So it was good for this campaign to have some visibility, and we were able to also to make some billboards in 3 different cities. It was also not to be only an online digital campaign, but also for people to see in the streets when they walk by. Also, we put in the ATM machines where people go to get cash. They for 2 weeks they were able to see the campaign in some ATM machines. And here in Apav, in our own headquarters, we have this banner, this big banner for people when get here they see the campaign. So we try to put the campaign everywhere, and also there were some news published. So this campaign have, and we didn't yet have the measurement of the impact, but until now we are happy with the visibility. So just to finish, the next step will be the measurement of the impact. And while each partner defined its own goals, there are some of them that are similar to everybody. That are the increase of number of victims that contact and report crime, the increase of number of calls to the victim support services, and the increase of the visibility of the support services and the awareness of its existence. So, and these are numbers that we will be able to get. So in the end, we'll see how the campaign worked, and we'll see if it has some good results. So this is what I have to show, and in the end, you can ask questions that I'm glad to reply. Thank you.
Thank you. No. So I will give the floor to Cam and Trisha, who is going to be the first. Is Trisha? Cam?
I'm up. Yeah. I'm up first with some slides. Yes.
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody in Europe. It's well, it's very definitely morning here in New Zealand, but it's great to be with you. I'm just going to share my screen now as well. One moment. Great. Okay, can everybody see our presentation up there now? Great, thank you. Well, look, my name is Cam Cotter. I think Inez gave us some brief introductions at the start, so I won't repeat those. And I'll be co-presenting today with my colleague, Trisha Henry. We are from New Zealand. It's a long way away. I found this pretty graphic on the internet. We don't use miles in New Zealand, but that's what was on it. 18,000 kilometers away from you all. As I explained to my little girl, that if we dug a hole directly through the earth, we would probably come up again amongst these people that Daddy is talking to tonight. In New Zealand, it's a bit of a custom to start a presentation with what we call a whakatoki, which is a traditional proverb, our Māori proverb here in New Zealand. This is one that we often use with victim support, which is aneo te po whirinaki, and that means I am here, your pillar to lean on, which is something which we see as a bit of a metaphor for what victim support does in New Zealand. A pillar of, could also be translated as a pillar of strength on which people can rest. Today, we're going to talk through a few key themes about our new website and resource centre that was launched earlier this year. I'm going to talk through those and a little bit of the background process that has enabled us to bring you that new, bring our clients rather, that new set of resources, and then Trisha will take you for a quick walk through the website itself. But I'd like to just challenge you to take away a couple of key themes. And the first is that quality information empowers victims. And when we look at how we support, how we assist the giving of support with information, we're playing an important role in terms of giving victims the information they need to make decisions for themselves, to be in the driver's seat. You simply cannot be in the driver's seat making good decisions without good information. The second is that you don't need a big budget to have a big impact. And, you know, we've built a very comprehensive resource. It's very accessible, it's modern, and we've done it for a reasonably small amount of money. We've spent all up about 120,000 New Zealand dollars building this site. That's about 70,000 euros. So not a huge amount of money at all to deliver a pretty good, well, I hope you'll agree, a pretty good product. And the third thing is that we need to think differently about how we use information to support clients. And in the same way that business and government are thinking, I suppose what you might describe as a digital first approach, it's the same for us in delivering services, that we need to think not about how we simply replicate old processes in a digital way, but we need to think about what a really online connected world enables us to do that's new and different the way we've worked before. And we've certainly had that in mind right throughout the process, that, you know, we don't need to be restricted to a support worker sitting down in the same room as a victim anymore. And certainly through COVID-19, the only way we've been able to provide support a lot of the time has been remotely. New Zealand's had some very, very long lockdowns, and first one was several months. So all our support went online at that point in time. And that really exposed actually just how dated our ways of thinking about information were, when suddenly we couldn't give someone information physically, when we couldn't rely on being in the same room. We very, very quickly saw just how little we were taking the opportunity to move our information and our resources online. So now we encourage our support workers to think about how they can use information where they couldn't before. So if they are, you know, supporting a victim remotely, if they're following up over email or text or over the phone, you know, think about how they can send information by email or by text message, how they can use this information online, these resources online, to as a source of information for themselves, as support workers, to I suppose anchor the discussions that they're having with victims about certain topics. I've always said to our support workers, if this project is really successful, you know, in 5 years' time, they'll all be sitting there with their tablet on the, you know, even when they are in the same room, and going through some of these resources with victims together. Particularly if you look at some of the information, for example, that Trisha will show you around supporting children, I can absolutely imagine just sitting down and going through some of that together. So a digital first approach to client information. We had a clear, I suppose, a hopefully clear vision or transformation we're trying to achieve as we move from what was a very, very dated website that was built about 2012 to something that we wanted to see as cutting edge. So the first was to shift our website from a static resource to a continually improving resource. And that's about not just the technology itself, but the way that we thought about the technology. So instead of saying we've got to produce a website and we leave it there and it just sits there in the background and it does what it does, to say we need to be constantly looking at our website constantly improving the information, responding to the way that our clients are using it in the real world. So our goal was to go out earlier this year with a site that was, we didn't see it in any way as being final, but a site that was enough to see how people would interact with it in the real world. And we're making changes to it constantly in response to the feedback we're getting from our frontline workers. The second was that we wanted to offer, and I suppose actually this probably should have been the first, but there's no particular order to these, but also that we wanted to provide an information hub on which victims of crime, trauma, and suicide can rely on at each step of their journey. A lot of the time we think of websites when we're talking this, I suppose the presumption behind a website when it's built is that you're talking to someone who's at the point of referral, someone that's having their first interaction with your organization is typically when you'd be the assumption you'd have about the person using your website. And we really wanted to challenge that. We wanted to say, look, actually, let's provide a set of resources that people will keep coming back to at each stage of their journey. So, maybe as they're going through complex grieving, when their case comes to court, or even they're looking for tips around police interviews, for example. There's a whole different, there's right throughout their journey, a whole different range of information needs the victims have. We wanted to make sure that they had a set of resources they could keep coming back to at each step, that would change as their needs changed. We had, this is the only website for our organization. So though it is a client resource hub, it has to support all business functions. So that did mean there was a little bit of competition for audiences. And we had a number of those. We had a very, very strict agreement up front, and we held to this right through, that clients were king, that they were going to be the primary audience, and we would never sacrifice anything that they would need for another audience. Now, this has not been a popular decision with our fundraising team, but as I manage the fundraising team as well, fortunately, buy-in was somewhat easy to get around. But there are some other functions it plays. It's been a really useful resource for us to recruit counsellors. We don't provide counselling at Victim Support, but we do have counsellors that can register with us and be and receive referrals. So it's enabled us to have a home for that process. It's enabled us to make recruitment more accessible and easier and bring that online. So there are some, both for staff and for volunteers, we have a mixed workforce. I just want to go back to that idea about quality information empowering victims. We have done quite a bit of research at Victim Support New Zealand. I'm sure many of you will have your own research teams within your organizations as well. And our research tells us something really consistent. And it's consistent not just internally, but it's consistent with other research we see in New Zealand from government sources as well. And that's that communication and information is continuously near the top of the list of things that victims tell us they're unhappy with, or that they feel let down by as they go through the justice system. This in our 2019 research here, Victims' Voices, which was based on qualitative research with victims of serious crime in New Zealand, information was ranked as the third most important of 12 justice needs that we surveyed. And in fact, it's more common for victims to say that they're dissatisfied with information and communication than it is for them to say that they're dissatisfied with the length of their offender's sentence. So that gives you some idea about how strongly people feel about the need to be kept informed about what's going on and had good information to make good decisions with. Our Chief Victims Advisor for Government, who's part of our Ministry of Justice here, her research, which is a quantitative version, we worked in collaboration, we did the qualitative, she did the quantitative, came up with the exact same result. So ours is based on, I think, 35 in-depth interviews. Hers was based on about 700 people in a data sample, but really consistent. That information communication need keeps on coming up. About a third as most important justice need in any survey. And it's not surprising. I mean, it is critical to be able to participate fully and fairly in the justice process. How can you if you don't understand it? It's critical for victims to exercise their rights. Likewise, how can they if they don't understand them? Also to reduce stress and fear. And I think I enjoy hearing from our frontline staff some of the success stories that they talk about, and often information plays a really key part. I think of the family who lost their father to a dangerous driving incident, and for them the biggest barrier to their recovery was actually finding out what happened. It wasn't the support, it wasn't the outcome of the court case, it was just knowing how their dad died. Now obviously our website can't provide that particular information, but it can provide some information about how to how to go through the police process or the coronial process to find out the information that they wanted, and with the support with the help of a support worker to navigate that process, they were able to get the information they needed, and that's been a really, really critical part of their recovery. In terms of technical needs, like any project, we need to keep up with there's a saying in New Zealand, keeping up with the Joneses. I'm not sure if that makes any sense to people outside of the English speaking world, but to keep up anyway. And so we had a number of technical needs. We really wanted obviously a really clean modern design. Needed to work well on all platforms and devices. It amazes me how many websites of reputable organizations still do not work on a mobile phone. You'll get on there and the text overlaps the graphics and the logo's too big and you can't navigate it. It's just amazing. Up-to-date in-depth information. We had to make a tough call here. Did we go into quite a level of detail and have a lot of content on the site at a cost of ease of navigation, or did we want to keep it light, make it easy to find things, but maybe not have the level of information that victims needed? We had some really good discussions with mostly with internal stakeholders, with clinical staff, but also with some of our service delivery partners in police and justice. And pretty consistently, when we looked at what information clients needed, it was clear that we were better off to follow a more in-depth site and have an architecture solution to make things easier to find rather than shortening our content. So there is a lot of content on the site, and Trisha will show you some of the design tools that we've used to make a lot of information available without having the site too busy or hard to navigate. I've talked about the need to cover all stages of the client journey, and as you go through the site, you'll see there is a clear, I guess, a flow of information that aligns with broadly with the journey a client will go through. That our resources were really well digitized, that it's easy to self-print every single resource. You'll see that our brochures, in line with a digital first approach, have moved away from the traditional format. So there's very few brochures now using the folded out format. We've moved everything to A4. We want support workers or clients to be able to hit print on anything on this website, and it should come out and be formatted to suit any home or office printer. And so even our leaflets now follow the A4 format. They're really easy to share via text or email or any digital platform. We wanted to champion the diversity of our client base and our support worker, our workforce. New Zealand's a quite a diverse country. It's about 70% European, but there's very large Indigenous, Pacific and Asian populations here as well. And it was really, we felt it was very important that whenever they came to the site, if you were from one of those communities, that you'd feel at home here, that it would feel like a place for you and a place where you could see yourself. And we needed to support those other business functions. So I talked about having an easy pathway to volunteer, apply for a job, or register as a counsellor. Content needs, champion the needs of victims while also providing organisational information. I've kind of covered that. Really wide wealth of information, links and downloads. You'll see how information is integrated right throughout the site. So we'll have, our objective is that when you land on a page, you first find the information that you want, and then second are prompted to find the information you are next most likely to want. And that we can cater for a broad range of crime and traumatic incidents. We challenged ourselves to think more broadly or more dynamically about who our clients were. Yes, we primarily support what we're call here primary victims, the person that the incident happened to. But particularly when we're talking about our website, which is a publicly accessible resource, we needed to make it relevant to a wide range of audiences, victim audiences, not just think of victims as one audience, but to think of them as a number of audiences. And so, yes, it does include those people the crime has happened to, but it also includes witnesses or discoverers, people that are assisting or supporting family or friends. And you'll see that in the design that we've made sure that there are areas of the site which are easily found that are relevant to people in those situations as well. We wanted to empower our victims to make informed decisions, move forward on their own terms, make our own service and our justice system more accessible, and arm the workforce with additional tools that would make their jobs more effective and easier. And contrary to where we started the project, where we thought we looked in our storeroom and we saw we had about 40 odd different brochures floating around, we thought, oh, that's far too many. We'll have to condense that down. Well, we ended up with 34, so we actually didn't condense it at all. But when we looked at what the needs were, the business needs were and the client needs were, that's where we landed, because people prefer a tailored resource to a generic one. And the beauty of online is that we can have a print as you go model. If the idea is that you print the brochure on your own printer when you need it, rather than being dependent on having 34 different resources in the boot of your car, then you can provide 34 different resources and they can be more tailored, and it doesn't necessarily have an opportunity cost. Small team delivered the project. Key thing I think really for us was going through a good quality process around the content. We outsourced the technical build. I'm not a tech guy. We're the content people, aren't we, Trisha? And we just had to trust the website, the IT people to know what they were doing. We had some interesting discussions sometimes, and we usually came out on top of those, but there's a few compromises, and I think that's healthy. But essentially, all content was first drafted by Trisha, who came in as basically our clinical lead on the project, or a content lead on the project, and she would work with a subject matter expert in each field. So we have a suicide team here, we have a homicide team, we have a family violence team, for example. So she would work with we would ask each of those teams to designate a subject matter expert to work with Trisha to develop the content. They would develop that together, would then come back through our communications team, whose job it was to look at it in terms of readability, make sure it's in simple, plain English. We had a few other subject matter experts that came in on various different topics. So for example, we had a cultural advisor that would help us in some areas, and I'm sure Trisha will walk you through those. We asked some of our external stakeholders to provide subject matter experts. So the police have reviewed about half of the content on the website and given a lot of feedback. The Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Corrections, and the Parole Board. So the Ministry of Education have looked over our youth resources. So we had some really, really good assistance from some of our external stakeholders, and actually getting them involved in building the site was fantastic for the communication after we launched, because they all understood it and felt they had a reasonable amount of buy-in. So we've had quite a lot of support from police on this, and you know, having had them invest so many hours in it, they now are committed to it as we are, to make sure that frontline police know about the resources. Originally, our planned timeline was for about an 8-month project thereabouts. In the end, it took us a bit longer. So our September deadline became February. And I suppose for anyone that's thinking about going out and doing an ambitious tech project, I would encourage you to be charitable with yourself on your timeframes. I had another organization come to us wanting to do their website and have a chat about our project, and they thought they could do the whole thing in 5 months. And you know, great at the start of the project, it just sounds fantastic. Yeah, we'll have it done in 5 months, but really, why push yourself to do it in 5 months? What's the what's the gain? You know, do it properly. And sure, you don't want it to drag on for years, but I'm really glad that we took a year to do it. And we started in February 2020. We launched in February 2021, and we needed every moment of the time that we had, particularly with a small team. I'm going to wrap up there, because otherwise I'm going to use all of Trisha's time. So Trisha, I'm going to just hand over to you, and we'll let you show people the new site.
Okay, we'll show you around. Kia ora koutou, everybody. It's been an honour to be part of the content development for the site. And one of the things, I'm going to be sharing the site now. One of the things that was so important to me was to make sure that we honoured that victim-centred value. So everything we did came through the lens of, so what's the point of having this on here from a victim's perspective? However, we also knew that here in New Zealand, we use a mix of paid and volunteer support workers right around our country. We have, like many of your countries, urban areas, but we also are spread out across a lot of rural areas where people are isolated, and it's hard for support workers to get to their clients, or volunteers to get to their clients. So we wanted to serve that workforce, the volunteers and the paid workforce, as well as we possibly could, so that they could help the victims. So one of the standout things for me here was that Victim Support New Zealand has been very committed to having very authentic faces. So the faces you're seeing at the moment on the screen are the faces of our support workers. And we're using photography of real Kiwi people. We don't want to have beautiful models who don't look like ordinary people. So we've tried to be very authentic and have an authentic voice that was straight talking and honest to victims, while also being respectful and compassionate, but above all else, really empowering. So let me give you a very practical guide. How long do I have, Inez? Is it about 10 minutes? Is that about right?
15, you can go around 15.
Okay, or just wave at me if I'm going too fast.
I will tell you 5 minutes before.
Okay. So here in New Zealand, our Indigenous people are Māori, and you'll see right from the get-go that we have a greeting on our site that says no mai, haere mai, meaning you are welcome here. We are here for you 24/7. And you'll see on the screen that we have also used te reo in some of our titling. And this is really because in New Zealand, we have a treaty partnership with our Indigenous population. But interestingly, as we do honour that and we be as culturally respectful as possible, other population groups feel more respected as well. So at the very top on the right, you'll see we have this phone number. And we also have the phone number down here. The reason for that is because we want to encourage those who come to the site to speak to a real person, as well as finding information on the site. So we made sure that this particular one at the top is a floating phone number. So as I scroll down, can you see it pops up over here? We also wanted to make sure that we covered off the organisational aspects that every website needed to do. So here are those things about us, news and stories. The councillor registration that Cam spoke about, where councillors can go straight to and express their interest, careers, that kind of thing. But we've added a couple of interesting new things. So can you see here on the right, it says quick exit. So you might be thinking, why do we want everyone to get off our site really quickly? And I won't click on it because it will take us off the site and I'll have to stop sharing. So, but when we click on this, the reason that this is here is this is to protect those victims who are feeling unsafe and who perhaps are victims of abuse or sexual violence, family harm, who, such as in the video that we saw shared before, they want to keep private their search of a victim support site. So this quick exit will take them immediately to a popular news site. So it will look like to anyone who comes up behind them that they're just looking at the news. But also as we scroll down to the very bottom of the page, we have this other section called Hide My Visit. And this takes people to information that explains to them from a technical perspective how they can clear their cache, how they can clear their digital footprint. So if anyone wanted to see what they'd been looking at, Victim Support New Zealand wouldn't need to come up. So right from the get-go, these were the kinds of things that we wanted to make sure showed our victims that we took seriously what they were going through, possibly. So you'll notice that we have here 3 key entry points: get support, practical information, and support our work. And they're echoed again down here. And you might be thinking, well, why have we got them twice? Really, it's because with our research and knowing our victims well and the kinds of situations they come to us in, we know that very clear navigation that gave lots of choices and options for finding the information was the smart way to go. So that if their eyes are flitting all over the place because they're in shock, they're agitated, they're in distress, they will have a higher chance of landing one of these key entry points by having them repeated. So what we've done is we've tried to take this large amount of information, and it is a huge amount of information, and allow people to do this. So in the Get Support entry point, which we'll look at in a moment, people go through by crime type or incident type. So you may have noticed, Cam also mentioned that Victim Support New Zealand supports not only victims of crime, but victims of suicide and also victims of traumatic incidents. So for example, it might be a workmate who witnessed the fatal death of a colleague in a workplace accident, that kind of traumatic incident. And although we're a long way away from all of you in Europe, we too have some very serious crime and serious traumatic incidents. And we have tried, like Portugal, when you were talking, Nunca, about how you approached your work, we also were looking for a breadth of crime to be represented. So that's where people go by crime, but here we have practical information, and you'll see in a moment that's information that is relevant for people right across the board. So let's go in and have a look at Get Support. So here's a victim. We'll click on Get Support and you can see immediately some of these crimes and traumatic scenarios popping up and giving them options. And again, you can see the te reo, Māori, translation underneath. Well, there are so many crimes and traumatic incidences. How would we be able to show people them all in one list? So can you see this one here? It says other crimes or incidents. So I will show you that in fact, I'll show you that now. So when we come to other crimes or incidents, this takes people to simple landing pages with a simple image, cybercrime, indecent exposure, stalking. I think that was mentioned in the video too. Fire, and in this section, we will be adding more crimes and incidents. For example, we're just about to add more information about flooding, victims of flooding. We get a lot of flooding in New Zealand. So let's go back to the main topics. Now, the reason we chose these topics was because these are the ones that, sadly, a lot of victims in New Zealand come to victim support for. So some of the pages are very simple, such as if we go to assault. These are single pages. When people go onto the pages, can you see here that we have a crisis help come up? That links people to crisis numbers. And can you see here, we've made it really simple, as Cam mentioned, to be able to print and also to share the information that's on the page. So here is a page that describes the crime of assault. We've had New Zealand Police go through every crime to make sure that this is accurate and credible information. And we have good arrangements with them so that if there are law changes or changes in the way that police are responding to crimes, that we will know that information and be able to update crime by crime. So can you see down here that we have these drop-down boxes? So these boxes, the point of these boxes is to condense big information into more manageable, visually more manageable communication. So this approach is the one we've taken with all our crimes and traumas. Steps you can take, common reactions you might have, coping with your reactions, and how can we help? And that's because our research shows that this is what victims want. They want to know, what can I do next? Or what do I need to do next? What are my options and choices? They want to know, am I normal? And what I'm feeling, is that okay? Coping, how do I cope with this? What can I do with these big emotions, these huge and difficult thoughts? And how can victim support help me? So when we drop down, they're simple drop down boxes. We will, for example, here, steps you can take. We will go through their interaction with police. Here we have, for example, how you give a statement. We talk about how the police will investigate. And in this instance, we link them with information about how they can feel safe after feeling very invaded by the assault. As Cam said, the other thing that we're keen to do is to link them with information that is relevant to their crime. So you can see down the bottom here, and I'll come back and show you these shortly, we have downloads to information from our resource centre. These are professional looking, templated, A4, colourful, printable information that can be viewed or printed, shared, all online, or literally shared with someone in hard copy form. And at related links, in this instance, we have them linking to their rights. Let's go back and have a look, for example, at homicide. Now, when we click through Get Support onto homicide, we come to a landing page. As you will know, homicide is a very complex scenario with a lot of years of involvement for victims. But we've wanted to make sure that we've tailored the information. So let me just show you how we've done that. We have the shock of finding out about a homicide, those early days. We have that section, Next Steps, which explains all the different people who are involved. Then we have letting others know about a homicide. How do you tell people? Practical matters after a homicide, common reactions, finding ways to cope. But notice here, if you discover or witness a homicide death. So that's for those who just stumble across a homicide scenario, but it changes their lives. Here we have finding support after homicide now and the future. So that's taking them into the years that come. And here we have something for families, something for friends, for workmates, for colleagues, for employers, to know how they can support someone. So it's very comprehensive information. All the way
Trisha.
through these. Sorry,
Around-
Inez?
Sorry, around 5 minutes.
Thank
we
you.
can give you like a little bit more, but
No, that's
just
fine. Thank you. So throughout all these topics, we've developed a whole range of resources. And these resources are linked to in the relevant sections. And I'd like to show you some, for example, in the Resource Centre to do with homicide. Just going to stop sharing the screen here and just share the next screen. So this is an example of some of the resources that we have. Here's one called Dealing with Flashbacks. Now this resource was developed as a consequence of the Christchurch shootings, the terrorist shootings that you may have heard of in Europe that happened tragically here in Christchurch, New Zealand. Not long, and some months after that, we had an eruption of an island off the coast of New Zealand where there were a lot of tourists affected and many lost their lives or experienced terrible injuries. And Flashbacks was something that our support workers said, hey, this is information we really need for our victims. So we've developed this, it's A4, you'll see it's a simple template. What helps people, it's just taking information that is actually on the website, but turning it into something that is visually engaging, easy to read. In the homicide area, we have, for example, here, after a homicide, supporting grieving children and young people. Because previously, we'd only been adult-centered. But what about our children and our young people? And our victim support workers know that when they're supporting families, the families say, what do we tell our children? How can we help our teenagers get through this? So this is an example of a new resource that the support workers are using constantly, because it's a question that's asked not only of the parents, but it'll be grandparents, aunts, uncles, other caregivers. So this is practical information. Also, after a homicide, for example, we've tailored our managing media. So we tailor these to be really useful. In the sudden death arena, we have supported people now with a resource we've called After a Death, Dealing with Practical Matters. And it literally takes them through very practical things that need to happen after a death. Here we are, have a checklist for people they might need to tell. Culturally, we call, Māori call funerals tangihana. So here we are talking about how do you find a funeral director? How do you organize a funeral yourself if you wanted to? And so on. After a burglary, we have, for example, a resource called After a Burglary, Robbery or Theft. And it's a checklist where people are empowered to go around their property and think, what is it that's been stolen? And immediately that helps them with insurance, as well as helping them to be clear, especially if they're panicking, what's gone missing. But at the end of the resource, we have simple steps for keeping their house safe. We'll just stop sharing here and we'll whip back to the website really quickly. So here in our resource centre, we have everything listed, but we also have listed by topic. Just before we finish, it's important I show you the practical information section. So if we don't go in by crime or incident type, here we are doing those things that Cam talked about, giving people information about coping with grief and trauma, flashbacks, what the heck are they? How do I deal with these? What is the justice system? What does parole mean? It's a whole lot of language, isn't it, that's new to many victims. We have a supporting others section that's for family and friends. And we also have a preventive section, which is keeping safe from future crime. Cam, do you want to jump in? Anything particularly you'd like to highlight since time is short?
No, I mean, I suppose people can always go away and have a look at it. The keeping safe section is a really, really good one. It's really useful for support workers to leave victims or follow up with victims afterwards and say, you know, great to see you, here's some more. One of the things I really liked about the children's resource, Trisha, is helping parents to have difficult conversations. So how do you talk to a child about death, for example? And we've got a sort of quite a chunky section that gives parents that information. So those are just some little bits of some little things that people might find interesting or might find useful in their own work.
Just to conclude, for those of us who've developed this content, one of the really professionally satisfying things that's happened is the feedback that's come from support workers who've said that this website and this information is now changing how they work. It's improving things for them, but it's also building their own personal and professional confidence in their role, because this information is credible and up to date and sound, and they feel really well supported by this. So that's been a wonderful bonus. Over to you, Cam.
Yeah, look, I guess the only other thing I would add to that is just around the cultural responsiveness stuff. And I think one of the learnings for us was that being culturally responsive in your content doesn't necessarily mean having really big, highly visible things. It's actually about most of your cultural responsiveness is achieved in the micro content. So if you look, for example, Trisha gave the example there of the tangihana, and you'll see that right throughout the content is saying, how do different groups experience their journeys differently, and they're making sure that where we need to, we're not assuming any one cultural process applies. So there are a number of topics across the website where we explain several different cultural processes in the same document.
And population groups is broad, so that would include our rainbow population, our elderly, our young people, as well as different ethnic groups.
Yeah, over to you, Inez, and hopefully there's some questions for the panel.
Thank you. This has been like an amazing presentation. I'm actually, so Cam, you just took me one question. I was writing down some questions that you just answered to one of those questions. So, but I would actually going back to something that you said in your presentation. Before joining Victim Support Europe, I was working in Apav with victims of crime, and one of the things that I found very useful for the victims was like simple things about like the information, like simple things like you're going to press charges, where are you going, how you're going to do it, you're going to make your testimony in court, who is going to be seated, who is going to be in the courtroom with you. So just telling the victims this information, it's like small things will just ease a little bit the level of stress of victims. And you've mentioned this about the information and how the information is provided and what type of information is provided for victims. I think it was regarding the knowledge and how to help victims to cope. And this is something that me as victim support worker, I felt very deeply. I've used a lot of materials produced at the time by Apav, and I found that it helped the victims a lot. So thank you so much for all the presentations. I'm going to open the floor for questions. I don't know if there's any questions. I have some already here. Can already answer one of mine. It was regarding how to go for like if I want to become like create an international, European, or a multicultural campaign, how to overcome these cultural differences. Do you want anyone want to reply? Open the floor to you. Cam, you're in a multicultural country. You said that going to the small details, micro content, it would help. Is there any other tips?
Yeah, look, the only other thing I'd say is, I mean, most of the feedback we've had about the site has been positive, but because the flip side of focusing on the micro content in terms of making things accessible means that we don't have lots of really high visibility things. So in terms of for example, some of our government stakeholder buy-in, where they are highly sensitive to that. Maybe we did need a couple of more, visible, really highly visible things. I think we've covered that off in some of the graphics and the photography, but different stakeholders have different intentions and different priorities.
We also have used an advisory group, and having cultural advisors is essential. We can't be experts on what we're not experts of. We need to have ears to hear and responsiveness. So it's a developing site, and we've pledged to our cultural partners that we will be strengthening it more and more with their collaboration.
Exactly, I totally agree with what Trisha just said. So at the end, theory is just theory. So as long as you don't test it and go outside of your office to test, to ask for feedback, gather information, that's the only way you can really overcome having multicultural background as a target, for instance, or even, as Trisha just explained, experts that are outside of your own expertise that you need, as well as having an agile way of developing, whether it's a campaign or a website in this case, being able to implement upgrades depending on the feedback you'll receive, and also depending on the tracking of the users. So knowing how users are in fact using the tool you have created, the content you have created, you might want to adjust it in a way that it is even more optimal for them to use it in the best way. So yeah, constant development as well as focus groups, that's how we call them. That's the best way to get amazing results.
Was my next question, how the creative process worked. So you think that focus groups is one of the main tools to develop a campaign? You're muted, Martin.
Yeah, as a creative, for the creative process, one key thing is being as much inclusive as possible, and including all the different stakeholders that would be somehow related to the project. So it could be the audience, could be the professional workers, anyone that has an interest in the project that you are developing. It's worth to implement or to include at least that person in the creation process. And in the way we work as a creative agency is, for whatever the project we have, we first have an initial brief from the client, where we go over all the different details. We also talk about the intentions of the project, what is the ambition behind it, and what is the best scenario, the ideal word scenario for them. And then from there on, we can have a second brainstorming session only with the creative team, where we come up with different routes. And these routes, which are creative options, then we come back to the stakeholders. We expose the different routes, and then we finalize the discussion on which are the routes that we want to take and which are the ones that we don't want to take. And from there on, we can develop the first draft of the project, the second draft, and then finally the third one. So we usually include 1 up to 3 feedback loops, because this is the most important part as a creative agency. Working from just a client brief and then going in our office for 3 months and then coming back with a final product is not at least the way we proceed. We really believe in constant collaboration, feedback, proximity, and this is what usually people appreciate most about us, is being able to be fully part of the project. The project at the very end is not ours. We are the ones that help you deliver it and make it best. But it is very important for the project to benefit from our expertise as well as be fully yours as a client. So making sure that you can fully own it, that it fully presents you and represents your ambitions, that's crucial to the project.
It's a relationship of trust you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And this creative process, Cam told us about their experience. It was around 1 year. Is it normal? 1 year is a lot to produce some content. I'm not from communication at all, so building and creating this kind of materials is not in my expertise. So should we tell or should we advise our other organizations that 1 year, 2 years? What is the timeline that is recommendable to give to produce a communication package, like a website or the materials, the content?
I would say two things. Number one, I would say that we should make the time to market as small as possible, meaning the time we go from the ideation phase to the first delivery. So this should be as short as possible. At the same time, I would say that the more we will work on it, the more we will finalize the tunings, the better the content will be. So it's really a combination of being able to provide something very quick, but also being able to use this first draft in a way. So delivering this doesn't mean delivering it to the final consumers or the final target. It means being able to deliver a tangible outcome that we can use to record and to measure the performance, to measure the feedback, and from there on being able to deliver a second version, a third version, a fourth version, to have something that is as close to perfection as possible. So I think two key elements. Number one, being able to deliver something fast that you can have tangible reactions, tangible performance, you can track, you can identify key performance indicators on which you can base yourself to make improvements over the time. And at the same time, keeping in mind the need of this continuous development. So whenever developing a website, in my opinion, it's a mistake to make a budget, let's say of 10 units and then spend the 10 units for the initial development and then have nothing else for the coming years. It's important to keep in mind that the website or whatever else you will develop will need some improvement and adjustments to make it better and better. That's the only way, in my opinion. At least that's the best way I have.
I completely agree with everything that you just said, Maher. And you know, I think one of the things that perhaps a learning for me would be to set clear expectations around that with some of our internal stakeholders as well. You know, it was never our intention to have a perfect site when we went live, because we need to see how the public interact with it, and then continue to improve it. And that's you know, that's the difference in thinking that we need around communications. Is these are not these sort of traditional, what we'd call waterfall processes, don't work well in this space. You need to have a continuous improvement approach.
Thank you. I also have here a question for Nuno. What is the time frame for measuring the difference KPI you implemented in the project in Prefect?
So yes, that was a question that Maher asked a little bit ago. Well, the indicators will be measured from the beginning of the campaign, that was in January, until the end, that will be July. But this year with the pandemic, we will have more difficulty to make a comparison with last year, because this year it is an atypical year. Portugal has been closed from January to March, and from Apav was available, of course, but only online and by telephone. So the numbers are different, and we can't make an exact comparison with the previous months. But we will try to, with the information that we have, we'll try to compare and see the figures, how they are doing. But this year and last year, it will be difficult to make a true comparison, because there are many factors that changed all this. But we'll try to analyze also, besides the numbers, with all the factors, and keep in mind all that.
Thank you, Nuno. So this is both a little bit for Cam and Trisha and Nuno. You've been working on some big products, your website, your campaigns, and Nuno, the private campaign and other project campaigns on very small budgets. Would you have done anything differently if you had a bigger budget, and what?
Do you want to answer that one, Trisha?
Well, you know, there's always a wish list of bells and whistles. And in fact, Cam and I, just this next week, will be meeting together about what we want to work towards. But we feel that we've got the bones right, like a good house. We've got the bones right. And once we've got that good foundation, then we can add as funding allows. Would you agree, Cam?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, there's some things that we would like to do, next steps that you know, around accessibility, for example. Maybe could we look at how information on the website could be easily translated? Could that be done at the click of a button, for example? How do we make things maybe more accessible for people with disabilities? You know, so those would probably be some of the next things we'd like to look at.
And
Thank
video.
you. No.
Well, I'm used to work on small budgets, but if we had this bigger budget, it would be easier to get more people. Of course, we are always learning it. And working with small budgets is good because it forces us to work better and to get more results with less. But yeah, if we have bigger budgets, it would be great for us to reach out to more people.
I personally think, I'm sorry, Ines, I think the budget pressure can be very healthy as long as it's an incentive to seek for efficiency and effectiveness in whatever you implement. So usually how we work, whether it's with, so we also work sometimes with startups, which also have quite low budgets. The starting point is not the final product. The starting point is how much value we want to deliver and what are the key aspects we need to consider and what's the priority. If it's a website of the different features we need to get in order to reach the most value we can deliver. And from there onwards, then you build your product instead of saying, okay, I want to build this and that. Oh, that's too expensive. Let's not do it. Working in the backward fashion, that's the way you can, I believe, overcome in a healthy way the budget limitations.
Absolutely. I think if you've got a budget, say your organization can afford to put 200,000 euros, you know, into 100,000 euros, you know, spend 50 of it on your initial project, or 100 if it's a 200k budget, and then keep the rest for continue improving it.
Development. Okay, thank you. Another question. While we were developing a project in Victim Sports Europe, we found that we had to change due to COVID. How did COVID impacted your communication, dissemination, everything? How did you manage to overcome the difficulties that COVID brought?
Well, in this case, well, the campaign was planned also was planned during the COVID, so we tried to adjust, but I think the main thing was more focus on the digital side, on the online side, and less on the physical side. But since life goes on and it's important to have physical materials too, we try to balance things. But yeah, in a general way, besides this campaign, we try to communicate and to work more online also. Apav was always working. There was just no support in presence, but the online and by phone we were always working, so we kept working all along. So even communication, we sometimes had to change some things that we had planned. Some things were cancelled, but most of things we were continued.
See, the irony is that COVID actually made this project much easier for us, because suddenly we had a workforce that wanted everything to be online. So that the timing couldn't have been better in that respect. I don't think we'd have got as good a product if COVID hadn't happened, ironically.
And I think also that our victims and their supporting families and friends, people just generally went online more and became more confident with the use of devices and technology in a way that may not have, normally have, including older people, for example, who might otherwise not have. So that was also a bonus.
Okay, now to all. In your experience, so there's a range of tools to work and to produce. In your experience, which are the most appealing, which are the easiest for the victims or your main audience to go and to remember, and what do you usually or recommend if we have an organization that has I have a really small budget, so I would prefer to focus on one or two tools for dissemination. Which tool would you suggest? And
I would start by asking this organization what's the main goal we want to achieve, because really depending on the audience you have and depending on the mission you have for a specific project or a specific allocated budget, whatever, the tool is going to be different. Please don't misunderstand me here. The tool is only a tool. It can have all the fancy functionalities a website have. It can be virtual reality, anything. If it's not targeted to the right person, if it's not customized for the right use, it's a tool that is not going to be used. So instead of spending thousands in the development, I would like to spend thousands in the strategical analysis to understand exactly what is the need, who are the people we are willing to help, and how are we willing to help them. And depending on this, it might end up with a campaign, it might end up with a website, it might end up with a platform like I've had before. So really depending on what the need is, because that's something I can share. Maybe most of my clients, they come to us and they ask for a website. Yeah, we need a website. Every business has a website. We need a website. We know that's the budget you usually have, between 10 and 30,000. That's the website we need. And when I discuss with them, I realize they don't need a website. They need an online marketing strategy, and they need landing pages, which is completely different from a website. So really depending on the need, the tool is going to be different. The tool is just a tool. What's important is first understanding your need and understanding where you are willing to go. And from there onwards, we might discuss the tools you want to use. I don't know what the others think as a reply to this question, but that's at least my opinion.
I'd agree with you 100%, Maha. And I mean, your content will change based on your tools too. I mean, I can imagine a situation potentially in a couple of years where maybe our workforce have better hardware. If every support worker has a tablet, then we'll start producing video content. But at the moment, it's not. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's happened as the world's become more digital and things have gone online, because it's cheaper to produce information that doesn't have to be printed in hard copy, it's seen as the best standard. But I do just want to give a shout out to the importance of having some hard copy information or online information that can be readily print friendly for those who want something in their hands. The number of stories I know and experiences I know myself of supporting victims who, when they get something in their hand, even if they don't read it, they feel empowered. They feel they've got something that's helping them. I've heard of counselling appointments being cancelled because people have read an information sheet. So as we think digital, let's not also just forget the power of something in your hand.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think it's nowadays it's essential to have an online presence. It's no need to be a classical website. But besides that online presence, some brochure, some physical materials to, in this case, to the victims of crimes. In this specific case, it's important to have something to give to people for them to take home and read later and think about it. I think it's important to have physical materials still. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your presence. It has been a great afternoon, a great panel. I love all your your presentations. So I don't know if we have anything else from any other question from the participants in the room. Otherwise, I will make my closings. No? Okay. So thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the participants for this long 2 hours in the afternoon, well, at night. Thank you, Trisha and Cam, for being here so late in your time. I've left all the information of all the organizations present in the chat. You can check out for more information. You can also text or email us if you have any questions and if you want more details. Thank you once again for your participation, and see you next year, or see you in the end of the year in our autumn conference. So, okay. Thank you all.
Go well.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.